is this organization with the tiniest budget, and God knows, you know, like the smallest budget in the world compared to the multi-million organization that is, you know, the Southern Diocese, specifically in Nashville, with like 12 churches. How is this organization the one that's distributing hundreds of masks and sanitary kits during COVID? How is this the organization that's managed to develop a tutoring program? How has this been the organization that is developing relationships with other organizations and supporting communities instead of going to employers and funneling community members into very abusive labor situations?
How does your work serve other migrants, and how has it been received?
Where shall we start? So how does it serve other migrants? Let's start with the easy one. So we serve a lot of folks. So the first steps where I was noticing that other folks were noticing us was when we were in the Southeast Library, which is in Antioch. At that point, we were very much like all our students were Coptic, all our tutors were Coptic, and we had folks who were obviously, they're like coming in with their friend, their Egyptian friend, and they're like, can I stick for this? We're both in chem together, and like she was a Nigerian student. She's like, I also need help with this. Can I just stick in for the class? Or we had Latinx students who were like, can I just sit in for this one ACT class? Or just all this like other communities noticing our work and seeing the need also within themselves, and also knowing the Coptic students as well. So the reason they felt comfortable to ask is because they knew a Coptic student in tutoring or in the ACT. So there were little trickles of that. And then during the pandemic, when we started our community Saturdays, well, let me back up. When we started our live streams, that's when a lot of Muslim communities, Arabic speaking, in Nashville started noticing us because these live streams were in Arabic. And they knew both my dad and Ashraf, Ustaz Ashraf, who both were doing the program. Ustaz Ashraf is a manager. He's in a management position at Gaylord Opryland, which employs a lot of Arabic speaking folks. And then my dad has his little grocery store. So people knew them, and we started seeing a lot of like our Muslim community members commenting on videos, asking us to come speak at the mosque and introduce ourselves. Note that none of the Coptic churches asked us. So that was kind of the first alert where it was like, oh, you want us to introduce ourselves at the mosque and say what we do? And they're like, oh, we just didn't know you had all this programming, ACT and tutoring. That's really amazing. We'd love to support you all in any way. We'd love to connect our community folks with you all. And so it was just, and this was like, Nashville has a huge Iraqi Muslim community. So this was coming from folks who are not Egyptian and not Christian, but obviously intersecting with our spaces, listening to our Egyptian Arabic live streams and connecting with it as well. And then came our community Saturdays, where we set up right outside of the Melwood Apartments, which used to be very heavily Egyptian and Somali, so like 80%, it's probably down to 50% now. And so a lot of Latinx folks stop by now, and I've learned Spanish. So they stop by and they pick up supplies for their kids, or they pick up the Panera bread that we have, and they're like, yeah, I'm willing to try this bread, even though, yeah, because we're like, it's fresh, your kid will love it with peanut butter and jelly. So, and we give out like cinnamon rolls to the kids. And so we've become known on that level as well. Sometimes we'll do like diaper exchanges and maternity kits as well. That's also very important for that community. And then we're also building like vaccine clinics. And right now we're setting up like a legal clinic, and then a pop-up clinic, and then a pop-up dentistry clinic for the same area, because a lot of these folks are not able to drive to clinics or not able to afford lawyers, etc. So that means a lot of that programming has to be also in Spanish as well. And something really important, like when we were doing our housing campaign this year, I was walking around and I was like, we're going to have to need people for this. We can just pull from Elmahaba volunteers to Canvas and we'll just do it in Arabic. And then as I was walking around, we were meeting a lot of Spanish speaking folks. And I was like, we're clearly not going to be able to capture what is happening to Egyptians in this community accurately without making sure the input of Spanish speaking immigrants and refugees is also in that. So it was just a very important moment for me personally, in seeing if, you know, you pigeonhole yourself and say, like, I'm only going to help Coptic people, or whatever, I'm only going to help Spanish speaking folks, or I'm only going to help Somalis, or I'm only going to help Ethiopians. At the end of the day, you're not going to, because these communities need each other. So that's the first side of the question, is that it's a very natural process that many other immigrants were drawn to us and drawn to what we are doing, because we don't exist in a bubble, nor do cops exist in a bubble. And it didn't matter that our Spanish is horrible, / non-existent. I should be more accurate about that. Or that, you know, the whole board is Coptic, you know, Muslim communities wanted to participate, and Latinx communities wanted to participate, and Somali and Ethiopian. So that's a very powerful thing for us and something we're very proud of. And how has it been received? We've had two main adversaries. One, first and foremost, the Southern Diocese of the United States. I'm not going to splice that. Mostly in the narrative, mostly because of the narratives we are creating. So when we're in Melwood, Melwood has this very negative reputation or rhetoric within Coptic communities. It's seen as, that's where newcomers go. They're nasty. Don't serve them. You're going to get cockroaches because they have cockroaches, because they're disgusting. And it's not safe to go there. You're going to get shot and you're going to die. It's not worth helping them. And I'm not splicing my language here. These are things that are said in servants' meetings. This is not at all an exaggeration of things that I have heard while sitting in a room and listening to servants who would rather go to a food bank in downtown than do a food bank for Coptic people. So a lot of negative rhetoric about Melwood. So when you have a community organization, and of course, why do we have this negative rhetoric? To justify not supporting newcomer immigrants, right? Because the idea is they're a burden to the churches. So if we hate them and we justify that hate, we don't have to take care of them. And instead we participate in the language, they have to take care of themselves. I was once a newcomer, I made it here. They need to chill, they need to get up on their feet, they need to move to Antioch, they'll make it. So, of course, all that rhetoric is very, very, very focused and centered in churches' spaces, because the church servants and priests really do want to select who they are serving and why they are serving, because at the end of the day, the money is scarce, because this is a working class community. I'm not splicing my words. So, because at the end of the day, that's what we know is going on at the Southern Diocese, is it's a money game. So mind you, a lot of Coptic youth in Nashville are incarcerated. A lot of them are addicted to drugs and without support. There's high divorce rates as well, a lot of domestic violence, and all of this is fomenting and continually being taken to the churches. So to priests who are not trained to be counselors, to folks who are addicted to drugs, to counsel situations of domestic violence, et cetera, et cetera. So here comes this organization that's saying, hey, you could go to the Family Safety Center if you feel unsafe in your home. And they have someone who speaks Arabic. So, or they'll file an order of protection, they will get you what you need. Or here's a food bank that you can go to if you need food, and they will offer you culturally appropriate food. But the narrative that there are, one, resources out there, that narrative in and of itself challenges a lot of what Coptic people are being told by church leaders about where they should get their resources and why they should get their resources from churches. And it challenges the idea that this is an insular community. Do not communicate with anyone. We are a special community. We have to keep our Christian identity in order to receive full citizenship. We have to be unique and singular. Do not unionize with Somalis. We don't have to be in communication with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, even though there are literally so many churches right next to our Coptic churches, but there's no communication. So an organization coming in and saying, no, there are resources, and we can use these resources and we can improve them. Especially the more Arabic-speaking folks go there, the more these organizations are pushed to hire someone who speaks Arabic, if they don't have someone already on there. And then, on the other hand, one of the larger conversations that Elmahaba pushed was, how is this organization with the tiniest budget, and God knows, like the smallest budget in the world compared to the multi-million organization that is, the Southern Diocese, specifically in Nashville, with like 12 churches. How is this organization the one that's distributing hundreds of masks and sanitary kits during COVID? How is this the organization that's managed to develop a tutoring program? How has this been the organization that is developing relationships with other organizations and supporting communities instead of going to employers and funneling community members into very abusive labor situations? So it's made a lot of folks question the structures of the church, so that even when folks who don't really like us feel that, wait, something is wrong here. How is money being spent in these churches, especially during COVID, when it was a full-on disaster and the churches were not used as resources? In that way, it was definitely coming. I did not think it was going to come after less than 2 years. But the Bishop Yousief declaring us heretics and dangerous people without signing his name, without putting it anywhere on his website, just on social media and disseminating it. And then when people would call him and say, wait, do you mean Elmahaba Center, the one with Yousief and his daughter and Ashraf? And he would just deflect. And so it spent like months in rotation where folks did not know what was going on, to show you another level of abuse and withdrawal, and clearly a bishop who doesn't care about, in my opinion, clearly does not care about the community in Nashville. Not even worth the dignity to explain what his actions mean and what his words mean. Just create the chaos and let it be chaotic is the functioning narrative, and then just do a trip and build some more churches. So it's been received obviously from the church hierarchy as a threat to the narratives they have, and the image that they want to have also in Nashville. And then obviously by the upper class, we are very much hated as well. Very much they have come after us and harassed us with private accounts. Like the comments on our live stream sometimes will be like, you should help people in Melwood apply for jobs. Don't give them, not giving them food. That doesn't help them. Or you guys make us look bad because then non-Egyptians watch these live streams of you in Melwood and think that we're poor. And this is all fashkhara, mazhara of like making us feel bad that Melwood exists. All this like very like reflective anti-poor rhetoric that is just bubbling at the core of Nashville. And then people push back against it. So there's like very much an online presence of, as much people push against this and say, you know, you shouldn't be distributing food, it makes Egyptians look bad, then you have another group saying, Wamelek, you know, like, we need to support each other. If we're not going to support each other, like, what does support look for you? No one's going to say, don't support Egyptians within the Egyptian community. So what does that look like for you? So that is really something that's very important about Elmahaba, is how much we've changed the conversation within 2 years, so that people know that there's a challenger to the normative language, that if, you know, the bishop's going to sit and say homophobic language, there's going to be an organization that is not going to participate in that and be very Coptic. We're not outcasts, we're not exiles. We are Coptic and we don't hate queer people. So I think folks in Nashville still are thinking about it and seeing, like, where is this going? Because many people thought after the bishop called us out in November of 2020 that we weren't going to survive, that was it. You know, if the bishop disapproves, that's it for you. But it's been very clear that if you give him power, he has power. If you don't give him power, he doesn't. So if you say, cool, great, we're moving on, he's not, and he can keep his problematic harassing and whatever he wants to do, but we're going to keep marching. That to people was some type of miracle and some type of, like, oh my God. We've definitely taken a hit after what the bishop said from the community. So we had a lot of folks who were supporting us, and then that got reassessed. So for every person who still watches the live stream, for every person who is still liking, and for every person who's very visibly involved and like coming out to community Saturdays and participating with us, that sends a signal to what the bishop is intending for Nashville. So that's how it's been received, and that's how we're working with it step by step. And I see in the long run, I don't see this being like a very, you know, pick one side, the church or the Mahabba, because that's not how that's going to work. But I do see this as a shift in what the church is doing, and hopefully the growth of new Coptic organizations in Nashville, and hopefully a challenge to the corruption that we're seeing in the Southern Diocese, the very apparent corruption, and folks, the Coptic people, chipping away at the narratives that have been coming in for decades from this diocese. So yeah.
You're surviving and you're thriving.
We hope.
You are. And people see the good work that you're doing, and,
yeah.
And they recognize it and they respect it and they stand behind it. We you know, we're not all in Nashville, but we see you and we are in awe of the work that Elmahaba does.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. It's hard some days. What's the importance of community archives?
It's very simple. A community archive works within the community to preserve, protect the community's history and heritage. You have material. It's either in somebody's basement or in somebody's home or in the church basement, because donating to the church is seen as more valuable than preserving this material somewhere else. And that's our history. That's our history behind closed doors.
Right.
So a community archive allows us to preserve that history, and it allows us to put it in the hands of professionals, to put it in the hands of archivists that know and have been trained to care for this material,
Right.
that will arrange it, preserve it, protect it, and allow it to be what it should be, which is a living record of a community's history, of their heritage, of their culture, of who they are. So what Egypt Migrations does is we are the facilitators. We outreach to people. We explain the importance of a community archive.
Right.
And then we take that material and we place it in the hands of the Clara Thomas Archives at York University. There is a donation form. There is legal record. You are giving this material to the archive, and at any point you can say, no, I want it back.
Oh.
If you so choose. But we hope that you don't.
Yeah.
And of course, the archivist does their best to accommodate your needs, right? And we are all in conversation together, making sure that the material is preserved, that you get to choose. Let's say, for instance, you have a file on tax documents, then that can be placed under access restriction for 100 years, that nobody can see it. So there are varying levels of access. And a great thing that comes out of our partnership with the Clara Thomas Archives is they will even go, if the person chooses, they will go to the length of creating digital reconstructions of the material for you to hold on to, and the originals remain in preservation at the archive. So you're not losing it. In a sense, you are ensuring that it lives on forever. And the last thing is, a community archive can do something that an institutional archive can't. So archivists at the Clara Thomas Archives, or archivists at the National Archives in Washington, or archivists at a local museum near you, they are very knowledgeable, skilled, and very prodigious individuals. But they don't know who the Copts are at a deep level. They don't know Egyptian immigrants at a deep level. And so having a research team like myself, like Murray, like other people on our team who know this community, have studied this community, be able to advise the archivist, be able to catalog the material, to create translations, to create transcriptions of Arabic oral histories, to get this work organized, this archival material cataloged, and to be able to tell them of the significance of it. The community archives do a great service to the national history because they allow us to tell the stories of immigrants. At the archives currently, we actually do have this tiny little cross, or bronze cross, that Bishop Samuel, who was the Bishop of Ecumenical Services in Egypt from 1962 until his passing in 1981, he used to travel all over the world because he was in charge of the diaspora, all of it, until 1972. He used to travel and he'd have this envelope filled with these little crosses, and he would pass it around to give it as a baraka to immigrant families when he'd go and visit them. And often he was like, the only face they would see from home, because there's scattered all over North America. This was when the community was still very small. And I received one of those crosses to be deposited at the archive.
Wow.
And that's a story. That's a history. That's a part of our history. And if we don't have that, we can't tell these stories. So what do you find most rewarding about what you do?
To see the beauty and diversity of Arabic-speaking folks, and for Arabic-speaking folks to engage that as well. So yes, I'm seeing a change in Nashville, and it's mutual somewhat. So yeah, that's also very rewarding.
So what advice do you have for others wanting to follow a similar path?
I think one very important is locality. For something like Elmahaba, I don't think it would ever be as powerful if it was on a national level. Or if it was, even like on a regional level, right? Like if we did one in Atlanta and Texas. The real power of it is that we are very local. So I think the tendency within Mahabba, or with any, I think definitely if you spend a lot of time in organizing circles and activist circles, the mentality is always, how do we make this bigger? How do we make it national? How do we make it larger? And sometimes that's not the way to go. There are some things that need that level, like with Egypt migrations, clearly the route is to create archives, and to have those archives in communication with each other across the world. That makes sense. Versus empowering communities, you're taking a lot more powers away from communities, and what their needs are, and for their ability to, again, tell and engage with each other what their needs are and how to get there. You're taking a lot of that power away when you make something much bigger, or much less centric on the community. So that's my number one advice. If you're going into anything that is community-based, keep it so. Keep it within that community, and instead of making it larger, make it larger within that community. So adding like Spanish-speaking interpreters to a legal aid clinic, so that way Arabic-speaking folks and Spanish-speaking folks are coming to the same clinic. There's a lot of big worldliness within your backyard and within the communities, your neighbors. And I think developing that allyship in the city or in the town is very important. And don't always assume, this is another big peeve of mine, that someone who's Coptic in New Jersey has the same alliances and futures and needs as someone who's in Nashville, as someone who's in Florida, as someone who's in Corpus Christi. Coptic people may have more alliances. Like someone in Nashville may have more alliances with someone who's Somali, and here in Nashville than a Coptic person living in Manhattan, for instance. So making sure that when you're defining community, you don't have a very rudimentary vision of that, as just, oh, all of these people are Coptic, or all of these people are Mexican, or all of these people, whatever, are women, all these people are queer. Instead of drawing that large circle, choosing to define that, especially in this type of work, is really important. And I think the last thing will be know that it's extremely difficult. It's not a fun road to go down. So you have to know you have to know your stuff. You have to know strong community members. You have to be able to stick to your guns. because there will be a lot of resistance, and you have to, there's just a lot of work that is done, and there will be a lot of pushback. So you have to be willing, if there are 10 failures, you have to be willing to wait for one success to come up, and you just keep going. I don't want to say failures, but like 10 setbacks, one solid win, and then you just keep going.
How can others contribute to Almahaba?
Yeah. So give. There are really kind of three ways. There's obviously the financial giving, and then there's the giving of time. So those are the two big ones, but there are other ways. We are constantly in need of, like we had someone who translated the website into Arabic and took the time to do that, which was an incredible feat to do that completely for free, and I'm forever grateful. Or we have folks who are like, hey, a lot of folks pitch me ideas, even if they're not from Nashville, but they're very motivated about what's happening here, which is really great. So things like that, like brief research. We are always accepting pitches, whatever folks think. Sometimes there are things I don't see, like someone wanting to fully translate the website is a huge undertaking, and something we thought we were going to have to wait like 3 years for, and we found someone right out of the blue. Someone coming up to me and saying, hey, I have, I'm the president of a legal aid society, we'd love to partner up with Elmahaba. Or someone saying, I can write news articles about this, whatever comes to mind. As long as it supports the community, we're here for it. So in whatever capacity folks can give, we really appreciate it. And in contributing to Nashville history and Nashville Coptic legacy and endurance city. Yeah. And how can others contribute to Egypt migrations?
Give.
I know, it's totally, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we accept archival donations. So please give your photographs, your documents, your records, your books, and give financially. We have a donation drive. I heard this once, you can't serve the community if you can't keep your lights on.
Yep.
And so for us to do the work that we do, we need people's support. We need people to give financially to our donation drive. And we need people to give of their time and their expertise in much the same way as Almahaba. And the third thing is to share and tell others.
Yes.
Encourage others to join our network and to give themselves and to visit an exhibit or read an article. Tell your friends who perhaps don't know much about the Copts or about Egypt and Egyptian migration. Send them a link. Let them know that this exists out there and they can learn from it if they're interested. And maybe eventually write for us yourself. It adds to the tapestry, it adds to the richness of all of our interconnected stories as migrants. And I think that's powerful, and we need to really ensure that we protect that and keep this conversation going forever.